All right, in this video, we're going to talk about how to make your narrative writing even better. There's a couple things we're going to focus on in this video, although there are other things to think about with narrative writing, and you'll see the rest of them in the content for this module. But I want to focus on three things here: character, setting, and plot. These are three things that you can look at in your revision process that can really kind of up the game in your narrative writing, just by taking a little bit of time to think about how you can enhance them. If you haven't already read the story, My Dad Tried to Kill Me with an Alligator, that's posted in the content for this module, please go back and do that. Stop this video and read the story first and then come back. You can also use the QR code right there on the screen if you want to open the story on your phone or a tablet or something and read it there. But I do want you to have that story read and also pulled up somewhere easily accessible for this video. So having read that story, I want you to stop and think about for a few minutes, what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What stood out to you? What kind of impression did it give? Think back to our descriptive writing module. What was the dominant impression of the story? How did it make you feel? What are some descriptions, phrases, and words that stood out to you? Especially thinking about the characters and the setting and the action that happens in this story. We're going to start with some tips for character development. So you all know what characters are, right? The people in your story. And in the stories that you're writing for this class, many of you are going to be the main character in your story. You're going to be writing about yourselves. Maybe not always, but I think in a lot of cases that will be true. But you will also have other characters probably in your story. They could be friends or family or just other people that are part of your story that you're going to tell. And so even if they're real people and you're telling about a real thing that happened, you can still develop your characters in a way that will help your readers really connect with them and kind of understand who they are as people. So think about the characters that are important to your story. So obviously your main character, which may or may not be you, and any other characters that are important. So let's say you're writing a story about baking with your grandma and how that was an important part of your childhood. Even though you're the main character in that story, you're also going to want to do a good job developing your grandma as a character, right? You want your readers to get a feel for who she was and why she was important to you and what her personality was like. So think about your characters' actions, thoughts, emotions, and complexities. What makes them interesting people? Every human, right, has a lot of layers to their personalities. So what are the things you really want your readers to know about your characters? You can describe their physical elements, their mannerisms, their temperament, things that might make them unique or eccentric or kind of set them apart from your average person. What are the things you want people to know? You don't necessarily have to describe every single thing about that person, but you want to make sure you get across the things that are really going to make them shine in terms of your story. Think about their distinguishing details. Maybe your grandma had a certain way of doing things that is interesting, or maybe she had a certain physical characteristic that you want to mention. You also want to think about how your main character changes throughout the story, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as we get to plot in a few minutes, but in any good story, the main character goes through some sort of change, and it might be a huge change, it might be a tiny change, it might be internal, right? Or it might be really, really external change. But somehow your character has to change. And so through your character development, you want to make it clear how that change is important to that person. Consider your character's motivation. What is the motivation for the story and for what happens in the story? What is their motivation to change or, to what makes the story happen? And then think about your minor characters. Pay attention to them. But also you don't want them to take over the whole story. So you want to describe what you need to describe and what you want to get across to the reader, but make sure that your main character is really the highlight of your piece. So I just pulled out one quick example from this alligator story. This is a description of the main character's brother, who he calls Bird. So take a minute and read this and just think about the description and what kind of comes across. What do you know about Bird from reading this? I think it's true just from reading this. You can tell that you get a little bit about who Bird is as a person, right? Like he says right here that he's a badass. He's got a mullet, he's got a driver's license. So being a little brother, this bigger brother was obviously kind of like he idolized him, right? He looked up to him, he was cooler. And the pirate thing, I think for a little kid just made him probably look that much more cool. So I think you get a good visual image of this character, even without knowing, let's say, what color hair he had or sort of the basic physical characteristics. You still get a pretty good visual depiction of what this guy looked like and also how he was perceived by his little brother, who happens to be the main character. And that was just done in a few sentences. So think about how you can kind of describe people in a way that is concise like this in just a few sentences, but tells a lot. All right, so let's move on to setting. The setting for your story is obviously where it takes place. So how important is the setting to your particular story? In the alligator story, the setting is really important, right? Because it's on a lake and the alligators in the lake, and it's kind of all about the scary things that happen there. And so setting is a pretty vital part of that piece. In your story, the setting might not be that important. It might be more about what happened, right? For example, learning about a disability that you have or something like that. Maybe that was at a doctor's office and maybe there really isn't anything really that distinguishable about that doctor's office. So what's more important is the dialogue or the way you felt that day or, what happened after that. So setting may or may not be really important to your piece and you need to think about that. If it is important, then certainly make sure you spend some time on it and use a lot of sensory detail and figurative language and the things you learned in the descriptive module to make sure your readers can really feel like they're in that setting too. And in some stories, the setting might change, and that might be an important component. For example, if you talk about moving from one place to another, maybe from very different states with different climates or very different houses, then the change in setting might be something you need to focus on. So just think about how setting plays into your story and whether it's important or not. So looking back at the alligator story, we know that the setting is on this lake, right? Did you feel like when you read it, you could kind of picture yourself there? I did. I felt like I was kind of sitting in the boat with those two boys when they lost the fishing rod, and they, thought that they saw alligators and things. I felt like I could have been there too. So the descriptions were really clear and vivid and helped me place myself into that story, which was really important for this particular piece. So I would encourage you to go back, maybe pause right now and go look at that story again and pull out a paragraph or a few sentences that kind of help you place yourself into the setting of the piece.